Hello, my friend Mike.
How's it going, Derek?
You know what? It is a great day to have a great day, to
It
steal
is.
from Joanna. Um, I notice you have a friend with us again.
Yeah, one of my best friends in the world, man.
Awesome. Well, introduce us.
Hey, this is Mr. Stephen T. Cox. I just know him as Stephen. Currently he's the director of music education for the Willis Wonderland Foundation. Of course, that was organized in memory of the legendary songwriter Allie Willis, and he develops programs and curriculum just basically around the world. I'm going to maybe exaggerate a little there, but around the world he does that. Um, I knew him as just a clarinet player in early Texas at one time. And then he
Oh
kind
yeah.
of went through Howard Payne, and then he was the band director at Eastland for about 10 years. Took his band to Midwest, state marching contest, demo group at Texas Bandmasters Association. Lots of really good success, both in the trophy rat race and also in instilling such a sense of culture in Eastland with digging into the history of Eastland. And then he went down to one of the oldest campuses in San Antonio. And is it Fox Tech? Is that the name of it? Cats
Yeah, the
Tech,
Fox
Fox
Tech
Tech,
campus.
Fox Tech campus. And it's basically like a medical engineering sort of magnet. And
Like
he
a
took that
STEM.
program, yeah, but not a music magnet, but he took 37 kids and made it 315 students with, and he's going to talk about this, I'm sure, because I hope he does, with his modern band philosophy and movement with it. And so he's just goes around the nation doing things. I think the thing I'm most impressed with, besides the fact he's just a wonderful person, is he was the winner of the Grammy Music Educator Award in
Yay.
2022. And man, that is a big deal, you know. And when they announced him as the winner, I said, Steven? No, I'm kidding. But
And
yeah, that was quite the experience. Maybe he'll visit a little bit of that. But that's my introduction. And usually we'll call each other like on a Sunday afternoon, and we'll both be doing laundry, and we call it the podcast from the laundry room. We'll just talk on our phones for a few minutes about updates in life and so forth. So this is Mr. Stephen Cox, our guest this morning, and it's going to be a fun one.
well, hey, and people may not realize this, but that Ask Mike podcast has been going on for years. It was just a call-in show, and we record it. And you've given me professional advice for the past decade. So,
Uh,
yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
appreciate what you guys are doing here. I think that's gonna be fun.
yeah.
So I have heard of the Grammy. What is was that a cool experience?
Oh no, it was terrible. Of course, it was cool. So,
But I mean, is that something you went, hey, I think I need to earn a Grammy? Or is that something that was nominated or
yeah, so I'll do the quick version of that process. And that was an amazing experience. And it was reflective of the work we were doing there in Eastland. Like, it's amazing that they built a process that could recognize someone all the way across the United States in a town of 4,000 people and to recognize the work we were doing. And that very much was collaborative work. Juan Hernandez and Jet Lawrence were working there with me. They're amazing directors. And the program that we built together and the philosophy that we had behind it, I think really attracted that attention. But it started with a student scrolling through their Instagram and seeing an advertisement for this thing and thinking, oh, I'm going to nominate Mr. Cox for that. And that may be the coolest part, that any teenager would look at you and think that you were Grammy special, right? They don't even feel that way about their own Grammys, you know?
right?
But so to have a kid do that, that's really, really neat. And then there's a process, and their process was actually designed by a man named David Sears, who's a music educator there in Los Angeles. And it was designed as a publicity engine for music education programs. So his thing was, when you see a teacher in the news, it's never for good stuff. And so he wanted to create and use, like, he knew the Grammys, their biggest thing, in addition to being, part of the Recording Academy, is that people know what that is. And so within music education, when you recognize someone, it requires a paragraph description of what that is. You think about the most prestigious things you can do in music education. If you try to explain it to an administrator, you need a booklet explaining what it actually is. But everybody knows what a Grammy is. So they developed this process whereby, anyone can nominate anyone. And, at that point, if someone wanted to say they'd been nominated for the Music Educator Grammy Award, they could do that and certainly use that themselves. But then they release a quarterfinalist list with hundreds of people on it. This comes from like an electronic ranking of a questionnaire they send you. And those few hundred people then make videos and record themselves teaching, and that's submitted to panelists of educators to evaluate. And all of those things, it's centered on what's your community impact? How do you advocate for music education? Obviously, if you are recording yourself rehearsing and things, there's some aesthetic of, what is going on in this classroom, but it's not about how many trophies you've won. It's about impact. And so I think there's a lot of neat things about that process, but I love the spirit behind it, that they just want to celebrate music. They continue to release lists, and there's a semifinalist list of 25 teachers. And about that time, all the local news stations start running out and interviewing their teachers and spotlighting those programs. Then a 10 finalist, and then the winner goes and attends the Grammys. And they were serious about this. They set me next to the CEO of Sony Music down in the front with all the celebrities. Questlove was to the right, and LeVar Burton was right behind us, and Joni Mitchell was 2 tables in front. And right next to me was the CEO of Sony Music, who had no idea who I was. But I knew who he was because I Googled him. And about halfway through, our conversation, he realized I was the Music Educator of the Year. He asked me all about Eastland, and he and his wife, Jules, both spent the rest of the evening trying to make sure we had a great time. And everybody was like that. There was not one single person I ran into that didn't immediately light up and have this amazing story about how music education impacted them. And so it was a really beautiful experience. I'm sure I left out all the important parts of that story, but I highly encourage anyone listening that when it opens up every single year, and just the gesture of thinking your life and nominating them is worth doing. It doesn't take very long to do it, and it's very fast. So if you're listening to this and you go to just Google Grammy Music Educator Award and find the nomination form, it's open through most of the year.
That is awesome. And
That's
you
cool.
said you might have skipped over some things, but I think you hit something very important, and that is the work you were doing there in Eastland, and the methodology, or the the emphasis of your teaching, and that's kind of what I hope we can dig into a little bit today. And full disclosure, never taught in public schools, never taught much of any schools, but I so appreciate, because I have my story too. And I've shared many times that when I found my band family, I actually figured out more about who I was, and what motivated me and what made me me. So that's awesome. I know it's several years, but congratulations on that. I love it to see people recognized. But share with us a little bit. Let's get into this. What is it about? That's the wrong way to say that. Do you think that you have an unconventional way of teaching?
Well, I think that lots of people teach in a lot of different ways. And I think that there is amazing, amazing work going on all over music education. And I'm very proud of what we did. And we didn't do that necessarily because we chose to do the things we did, but because we were convicted that it was the right thing to do. Like
Okay.
once you know more and once you know better, you have to do better. And so, I think lots of teachers go on an arc, and my arc is, I think whenever I walked into college out of my music education experience as a student, and started studying music education, that I was skeptical of a lot of things that are the norm, that are the system. And then whenever I graduated, I walked out thinking I was going to change the world, and I couldn't like get halfway through a class without total chaos. And so I learned very quickly that I still had a lot to learn. And I think that that led me down a lot of conventional paths. And then that path over time has led me all the way back to where I was in college, where I'm skeptical of a lot of standard practices and do things in a very different way. But I had to wander down the path. I had to do all of the traditional things before I, discovered both what was valuable for me and not. And I do think it probably is different for different people in different places. but there are overarching themes that I think are valuable absolutely everywhere. And so the first one is the move towards being student-centered and focused on, the students and their experience versus what we're kind of, formed to do, which is focus primarily in the band directing world on the output of the band. A band with an absolutely stellar performance and never take the class again will be a celebrated band program. And I would argue that there are many, many very, very good band programs that are never celebrated that are actually better than the band programs that are celebrated because we're not looking at many of the most important things, which is what's that experience for the students? How are they connecting to the music? What does music actually mean to them? Not just can they perform technically very well, but actually, does that have any meaning for them? Do they feel like they have any say in the experience? And are they likely to continue music making after they leave? I think those are really important things we don't measure. And when those became my focus, everything, including the output of the ensemble, generally became better.
That's cool, man. That's cool. With this idea of student ownership, like you said, we go through arcs. When I first started teaching, it was all about winning the trophies. I mean, everything was almost to the point I'm embarrassed to say that students were a disposable resource. That if they can't play the parts, you just put them in a different band. If they can't do this, just get rid of them. If they don't show up at rehearsal, make sure they quit, kind of thing. And through that arc all the way across now, years and years later, I'm really kind of seeing things the way Stephen Cox sees them, as far as,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, you've infected my brain. So as far as even like my beginners at Wiley in my last couple of years, we didn't do any chair test, because chair tests tend to pigeonhole kids and make kids give up because they weren't the best player. And we just did every kid is this is the rubrics of what you've accomplished, and that was handed to the child, and they competed with himself, if you want to call it competition. But I love the student ownership. I wish I would have done more of that. And I'm going to kind of play the devil's advocate here a little bit, because I think I know the answers to these because I've talked with you enough. But I think a lot of our listeners might have some of these same questions. When you give the students more ownership in the process, do you find it harder to manage discipline?
Yeah, so I want to do that. I want to address something you said first.
Okay.
And that
Yes, sir.
was, talking specifically about chair test. I think that's such an amazing example. I did chair test for the first few years I was teaching, playing test in front of everybody, the traditional thing. And there was so much crying. Um,
Yeah.
the students, me, everybody was crying. I started to look at, I think whenever you as a ensemble director in particular start to view the last chair kid as important as the first chair kid, you're on to the right kind of path towards doing this right. And there is this sense that being constantly embarrassed about being the worst player is going to somehow inspire you. And I just have not found that to be true. I find that to be a situation where if a kid feels like they're incompetent long enough, then they will stop doing whatever it is we're asking them to do. And that's not just music, that's math, that's anything. If we make them feel incompetent long enough, that makes them feel like there's no point in trying anymore. And what I've found is that I would have kids that, they would work really hard and, they would be improving slower than everybody else. And usually there was a reason for that, almost always, and even in the times where I didn't find a reason, I'm sure there was one. And then suddenly, sometimes like sophomore, junior year in high school, they would just all of a sudden become one of the best players and a section
Yes.
leader because some switch just turned. And so like that investment was worth it, and not doing practices that were likely to run off that student was actually helpful. And that doesn't mean that they didn't have challenges and they didn't have feedback or anything like that. Some people use chair test for all those things. There's other ways to do those things. So when we're talking about ownership and discipline, we have to get back to the other question.
Right. Yes, sir.
We have to talk about what we mean by ownership. If you think the answer is you walk into the room and you say, okay, kids, do whatever you want to do, and you go like have coffee, that's probably going to be chaos. But if you introduce opportunities for students to have control of various elements with still a lot of structure. My argument is high autonomy, high structure, meaning the kids have lots and lots of meaningful choices, but it's all laid out in such a way that there are clear boundaries that lead them towards directions that are going to be positive. Maybe not always the direction I would have chosen, but directions that are going to be positive. There's various degrees of this, but think about things that within a band rehearsal, since a lot of the people listening to this are probably band directors. What could students choose that would be no big deal? Like it wouldn't be a problem at all. Well, think about what order are we going to do certain things in? Well, a lot of that I don't actually care about. I just picked something arbitrarily, or I think the programs that are really into this, what they'll do is they will, have leadership structures, or they'll have, temporary leaders, and give them assignments that allow you to stretch out and actually do more things than you could have done otherwise. Jet's actually really great at this with middle school students as early as sixth, seventh grade, taking and having them lead their own sectionals. Where, in a lot of small schools, you're not going to hire a 9-person staff and have everybody, do sectionals. But the students are pretty smart, and they, if you train them to listen and to work together, they can do a lot of sectional work in a positive way. Almost none of that works the first time you try it, but after a few times, it actually works really well. And, one of the things I love that Jet does is he'll actually make an agenda for them, the first few times they're doing this. Start with this, spend this much time. There's timetables, just like as directors, we often make schedules for our rehearsal. He'll make that for the students, and then transition the students to making that for themselves. And all of that's genius. But it gives the students ownership. It isn't the director's rehearsal that they're participants in, it's their rehearsal. So that's just a couple of examples. And, if your sense of structured is everybody is sitting there compliant and not saying a word and having absolutely no attachment to what's going on, but they're compliant, then yes, almost anything is going to look more chaotic than that. But if you walk into rooms where people are doing this well, what you see is a level of engagement that you nearly never see otherwise in any part of school, period. And that is so outrageously powerful that it's worth, a little bit more noise than normal.
Yeah, and I've watched that in action with Jet. Go ahead, Derek.
No, I was going to say Mike has a good noise theory. That sounds like it kind of there's good noise and there's bad noise. Don't always stifle the good noise. It might be helping you.
Yeah, it might be kids helping each other. Now, I've seen Jet do that process. It's an amazing. But I tell you what, in our system, at least in this part of the world of band directing, I call it the fire hydrant approach. That all the water comes from one source on the podium, and it's interesting. Like I'll go do an all-region band, and I'll simply ask them a question: "What can we do here at letter B to make this more musical?" And you'd think I was preaching in a church, and they're not allowed to talk to me. They just and these are the star players, and they'll just put their horns down and stare at me like, I thought that was your job. They won't say that, but you can see it in their eyes. And I just kind of wait it out. It might take 3 minutes, which is an eternity in a rehearsal. And I'll just wait it out. So I'm waiting for someone to give me some ideas of what we need to do. And once that dam breaks, oh my gosh, the energy level, like you said, Stephen, it just goes through the roof. As far as all these kids going, I think we need to crescendo here. No, I think we need more French horn right here. I think we need to go slower here than speed up in this section. And we'll just sit there and try those things. And then we'll just, by a yay or nay, where they just yell yay or yell nay, said, who likes that? Who doesn't like that? Okay, we're going to keep that. And you're exactly right. And I grew up in that system for the most part, where it came from one person. But I tell you what, Greg Miller was my mentor band director in high school. And my sophomore year, I ended up being first chair trumpet simply by attrition. It was like a battlefield promotion. All the other players had, graduated or dropped off. And he just literally just said, okay, Mike, it's your job to run the sectionals. And like you said, he gave me an agenda. And then by the time I was a junior and a senior, I was handing him the agenda for permission. So I had a little bit of that process, but I wish I'd have realized how awesome that was at the time in 1979, and did that in my band program when I started teaching in 1985. But I didn't. I just kind of went back to that same old thing, and it took me years to transition over. So I like what you said. I knew that's where you were headed, but I just knew people out there. The biggest comment I have when I approach people with this idea is, "Oh, I just don't know how we can manage the classroom," you know. And actually, the classroom manages itself if you do this
Uh,
correctly.
It's motivation. It's
Yeah.
motivation. You know, it's actually very hard to just sit still and do everything you're told with no input. Like, how many of us want a boss like that? Like, none of us. If our administrators treated us like most band directors treat their students, we'd go to another campus,
That's
right?
exactly right.
You know, so I think that you have to kind of get behind this idea that the reason students are doing something is actually more important a lot of times than what the thing is that they're doing. You know, and that's really important because that drives them to do a lot more of that thing. So if a
Yes.
student is practicing because they really believe in this goal, team that they really care about, and they feel like it's musically enriching to be making these choices, to be developing all of that for a purpose, that's so much better a reason to go and practice than, well, I got a playing test and there's going to be a grade and I don't want to fail band, this thing I signed up for that I didn't have to do to begin with, you know,
Yeah.
like the idea that we can manipulate students extrinsically into doing what we want and that it'll have the same meaning as actually doing the work of developing that meaning is maybe the biggest lie in all of educational practice. And so that's the idea there is that we're trying to, you know, empower the students to really have the way I started to think about it was this is I started to think there's way more time I'm not teaching the students than I am teaching the students. I've just got this little sliver of time, and in Texas it seems like a big sliver sometimes. You know, like it may be 8, 10, 12 hours, and other places they may only see their students, you know, an hour or two total a week.
Yes.
So you know, but for all of us, there's much more time they're not there. And there is a much bigger part of their lives that I'm not going to be there. So everything that they are entirely dependent on me for is going to stop happening whenever I'm gone. If they're motivated by grades when they're not in school anymore, they're not going to do the thing anymore because the grades are gone. And so we have to have something deeper than all of those things. They make a long impacting difference. And that's I think that's what we want as teachers when we really think about it is we want to have that lasting impact. And so that's kind of the argument for, but you know the argument against is it is more challenging. It's very easy to say to a kid, on Friday, you're doing a playing test. If you can't do this, I'm going to embarrass you in front of all of your friends and I'm going to flunk you out of the class. And if you do it, I'll let you sit up here close to me. I don't know if you want to do that or not, but and then we'll celebrate you, right? Like that's easy. What's much harder is saying, you know, what you're doing. Just giving your students options in rehearsal. What do you guys think about this? Soliciting that. And I think a lot of teachers are afraid that they already have this idea in their head. We're going to crescendo here, and they say to kids, "Do you think we should crescendo or decrescendo here?" And that they will say decrescendo, and it'll end band as we know it. But you know, that's not it. Like most of the first of all, most of the time you can decrescendo or crescendo anything and make a musical argument for that. Like you're already so ahead just by you know incorporating your dynamics. But you know, being able to talk about those decisions and why doing this might be better than doing the other thing. Well, you're building up the student's musical aesthetic. You know, when all the students there are thinking like band directors about every note and every phrase they play, oh my gosh, the band is going to sound good.
It is.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's what you're doing when you're asking those questions. Should we do this? Should we do that? I saw Barbara Lambrich do that at an all-region clinic. I just noticed that she almost never told the students anything.
You're
You know,
right. I've watched her
she
before. I was her organizer at a region clinic, and I was amazed how little information she forced upon them.
it was always, you know, my example is always, hey, trumpets, what do you think about the tuning in measure 12? Well, the trumpets are probably thinking, I bet we're out of tune because otherwise, why would they be asking? You know, but you literally go through this process where you go, how do you guys feel about the tuning in measure 12? and the room is silent, like you said, and
Yeah.
you say, okay, well, let's play it again.
In
And this
fact,
time
sometimes it's
you're
the
going to
only
pay
time they shut up. Anytime
attention.
you'll ask a question, they'll all shut up. It'll be quiet. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Silence. When you play again, now any information given, because now they're just paying attention to that.
Yeah.
There's so many things happening in a rehearsal, and a lot of times kids will just kind of go through the motions if they check out. So just by asking them if they notice what's going on there, you kind of activate those ears. And almost always, if you play it a couple times, somebody will make a guess just so that you move on. But over time, they start to hear it. And if they hear it, they fix it before you say anything.
Yes.
That's the goal. We want them to become independent musicians who are paying attention to all of these things. So I think for most people, the best thing you can do if you're going to make one change in your practice is to stop telling the kids what's wrong, what to fix, and start asking them what they hear. If you do that one thing, I think it starts the whole transformation in a really positive way.
Yeah. And I really feel like what you're talking about, this is kind of counterintuitive, but Nick Saban, the amazing college football coach of many championships, has a chapter in his book about when he shifted from transactional teaching, where like if you do poorly, I punish you. If you do well, I tell you how good you are, into transformational teaching, where it's all about what is best for the player, and it's a really interesting book of a man who's probably the most competitive spirit in the world. And that one chapter really stuck out to me because it was so anti-competition. It's the fact that a lot of the team leaders in his corporation, college football is corporation, I guess, were actually like little CEOs of their function in the team. That they were expected to do certain things above and beyond just catch the ball, throw the ball, block, and tackle. They were expected to do other things. So I love those benefits. I love those benefits. What are some of the challenges? There's got to
Yeah,
be
so
challenges.
of course there are.
I
Of
mean,
course.
everything has challenges, but
Well, the biggest one is that many of us that became band directors are absolute and total control freaks. And the idea that we're going to give any of that control to anybody is pretty challenging in and of itself. I'm right though,
Yeah, you're
like
stepping
me.
on my toes here, Stephen. I have a
Well,
place for my stapler in my office, and if the kids move it and don't put it back, there is hell to pay.
we're like that. We
Yeah,
the default is incredibly controlling, and some of that is we come out of a military tradition,
yeah,
and
yeah, that's
on a
right.
battle to shut up and shoot somebody and
Yeah,
not actually have any opinions about it, right?
yeah,
But we have deeper, longer term goals. We shouldn't have the kids constantly in fight or flight, and so we're a different kind of thing than that. Even though some of our traditions come from there, but the traditional approach would be, from the moment the kids walk in the room to when they leave, absolutely everything is laid out exactly as they should do it. This is how you walk in the room. This is how you sit in a chair. Hey, listen, kid, this is how you breathe. You're breathing wrong. You know, like there any other discipline where we try to manage everything all the way down to the breathing? And now there's obviously some benefits to, organizing the way that we breathe, but when you
yeah.
think about it from an outside perspective,
It is pretty
boy,
ridiculous when you look at it from the outside.
it it's a lot. It's a lot. And so I think the default in a lot of our minds is to absolutely control every detail, and we're taught that that's the way to quote unquote get results. And my argument is if you have an environment where everybody is completely controlled and they don't have any autonomy, what you're going to see is that most of those people are never going to engage with music making again after they leave because they never engaged with it to begin with. And what do we have in instrumental music education that I would argue is the biggest crisis? And that is a lifelong musicianship crisis. Most of our students never engage with music making again after they leave, but universally, people will say they love music. I think that the biggest challenge is giving up that control. The second biggest challenge is it is actually harder. It is actually harder to work with people than to order them around. To see yourself as a collaborator with the students instead of, the authoritarian. I know we don't think of ourselves as that, but again, if you look at most models, it's kind of what it looks like.
Mm.
And I'm not again, when people start thinking about this, they're thinking total chaos. What I advocate for is high autonomy, meaning the students have lots of input, lots of communication, lots of student directed both goals and learning and sectionals, but with high structure. You can give students autonomy and still make sure they're not running through the room. You can give them autonomy and still say, hey, we have this thing that's coming up that we have to get ready for. But instead of saying, here's how we're going to do it, you say, here's some ideas. What are your ideas? And how do we work together? So again, it's harder. It requires more work, but I think the dividends are really high. And again, I've become much, much less enamored by ensemble output. I think it is necessary that ensembles sound good. I think that if you have an ensemble and it sounds bad or it's embarrassing, that you're missing out on a ton of the benefits. Okay. But after the ensemble sounds good, almost all of the actual benefit really is for the director and not for the students. And so you have to start evaluating the most people that casually make music in their lives are not doing it to win anything. They're doing it because making music is awesome. I think most great music making worldwide happens on like a grade 2 or 3 level, as far as like how difficult it actually is,
Mhm.
and so chasing things like being the very best in the world or taking and playing the hardest music ever written, that those goals may not actually align with student lifelong musicianship. They may not actually align with the happiness of the students, the engagement, making your ensembles approachable for a general populace. Like all those things are also worth considering. And again, nothing against, high quality ensembles. And it's very different if you are teaching in a small place like I was in Eastland, and the entire town population, everybody, fire department, police department, everybody's 4,000 people, or you're teaching in a school that the school population is 4,000 people. There's going to be very different challenges and different opportunities in those places. But when it comes down to it, most of the students, they want to have an active role in what they're doing, and they want to make music that they like. And if you can get those two things right, everything else tends to tag along to the journey.
Can
And I
I
tell you what,
jump in? Go ahead, Mike. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, I was going to say from watching Stephen work that I know a question out there will be, can we be competitive if we do this? And I will voice it this way. I've watched Stephen work, and he puts it in the right order where the competition takes care of it itself. I mean, he had the little trapezoid trophies on the wall, and he had the state marching and play at Midwest and all those things, but he put it in the right order instead of we will compete. We will beat you until the right notes emerge. The beating shall continue. So it does work. And I'll tell you this from going and clinicking his band, it's the coolest experience in the world because usually you go to a band, a clinic, and you just kind of give information. But if you go clinic Stevens bands in the day, they would start giving advice. Yeah, first chair trumpet to go. Mr. Delaney, I think maybe if we try this over here, maybe this will work a little bit better. And all of a sudden, you catch yourself at first, Stephen. At first, I'm kind of insulted. You know what I mean? It's like, how dare these children? How dare these children? And then about 5 minutes later, you go, this is so cool. And all of a sudden, instead of a clinician just giving information or a band director giving information, like you said, you're the collaborator. You're the one that the information passes through, and they are smart in the fact that they feel led to be creative, but they understand that the person in front is the one who makes the final decision. And that says, well, I like that idea, but that's not going to work right here. Maybe that'll work on something else. So I just want to say that because I know that'll be a question in some minds out there. Can I actually be competitive and do it this way? And the answer is yes. In fact, I think you'll be more competitive if that's one of your goals. Derek, you
Or
had
you'll
something,
show up
buddy?
better in competition.
Yeah,
Okay,
and you'll
Stephen,
enjoy every rehearsal. What a
I've
concept.
got a couple of thoughts here, and I'm asking. I'm not as well versed as I pretend to be, but I do think that societally, not just band world, generationally, maybe that's a better way to say it. I fully expected my teachers, my directors, my authorities to tell me exactly what to do, and I said yes, sir, and that's what we did, or yes, ma'am, and that's what we did. But I think that they are. I think it's much more prevalent today that people are looking for a positive, how do I say it? The experience matters more to them than how much money or how many awards or how many that's the generational thing now is I will do things that create positive experiences in my life that matters to me more than necessarily awards or how much you pay me. That's a broad stroke, but I'm going to preface that and then say, second, we're talking about challenges. Let's say that I recognize that I don't have student ownership in my group. It's daunting, I think, to say, okay, I'm going to switch, but it's even more. Would you say that the hardest part of it is initially the kids are skeptical, and and as teachers or as individuals who feel responsible for everything, that we may this is a hard thing to say. We say we're doing this, but we're actually just trying to manipulate to accomplish something we want to do. Like we offer choices, but we body language and inflection try to influence them to do what we wanted them to do anyway, so we can say we have student ownership. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be rude, but that seems to me the challenge is the whole mindset and the actual giving of yourself to the process.
Let me say, there's so much to address there, and all really good stuff. That everything that I do right, I did wrong a lot first. Um, and so, same thing with, Mike's telling me that I put contest in the right perspective, and I don't think I ever got that walnut completely cracked. And so I'm even into a position now where I take what I will admit is an extreme position, because I think you're right, Mike. I think that introducing student ownership in all the right ways will make bands that compete more competitive. But I'm to the point where I am at a strength position where I don't think competition is necessary whatsoever, and that the harms on average outweigh any of the benefits. And we can talk about that in a minute, because I acknowledge that that is an extreme position, especially in Texas. And I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do. But the structures are telling us that we have to do this, and so it's nice to have a counterpoint to some of that. As far as manipulating the students and making them feel like they have choice, I fell into that trap a bunch of times. And so there's a couple tricks for this. The first one is, if you really, 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 really do not want them to make a certain choice, then don't give them the choice.
Eliminate that choice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like you can like choosing from a narrow set of options is still better than having no choice. And again, I believe in high structure, and there may be things, and there probably always will be, that are non-negotiable. Like, hey, being a part of this organization, this thing is non-negotiable. Like, you have to understand this is what we're all committed to. These are the events. This is the process, you know. But within there, there's usually a ton of opportunity for, again, students to make ownership and choices and to do those types of things. I would also say that one of the things about the student autonomy is that need for autonomy, it really is a need. Like, there's a lot of research that goes into this, a whole branch of psychological research called self-determination theory, that says that we have these basic psychological needs, and autonomy might be the most important. The other ones are competence, like you have to feel like you're going to be capable of doing something. And the other one is, oh God, I'm losing the word.
Relational.
Yeah, connection. Yeah, it's there's a specific word, and I've lost it, but it'll come back. But it's the need for connection with other people, the need to feel like you're competent at something, and the need for autonomy. And what I would argue that has happened to our society within schools is actually the top-down approach of standardized testing, of control by politicians and government entities, have actually taken away the autonomy of teachers, and the teachers have taken away more autonomy from students. I started school in 1992. Okay. So that's now a long time ago, guys. So I know I don't have as many years as you guys, but, that's still a long time ago. But that was also the year No Child Left Behind started.
Right.
And we have taken away more and more control and autonomy from teachers. We've reduced recess. We've done all these things. And again, when people's psychological need to have control over their life is taken away from them, well, then, yeah, they're less likely to be compliant in every single way. And so again, you would predict that if you did this top-down approach and took away control from teachers and students, that the students would become more unruly on average as a result, because their basic need for autonomy is not being met. And so, a lot of people that went to school before me, and even me in a lot of ways, can look back at having longer recesses, having more control over what they did in high school. Like, very few people my generation or before were expected to finish a college degree while they were in high school, and now that's like a standard thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's not that students are choosing to do that, it's that they're being told your life will be destroyed if you don't do this, and you have to take all these classes you have no interest in order to get this degree that you care nothing about, in order to go into this job you've never heard of. And we wonder why they're not as compliant as they used to be. So there's what I find is that it's that investment into the kids, their bank, their need bank, their psychological bank, the relationship bank, that if you give them more control, then also they're more likely to be compliant about the things that they might not have been otherwise. So like, your hard boundaries are more likely to be enforced if the kids have more room to make decisions and have input within those hard boundaries.
That's awesome.
I told you you'd be great, Derek.
Well, I have, and Mike knows this, I have two basic things that I think affect everything I do or everything any of us do. Number one is, do we have a relationship? And number two, do we communicate? And by definition, communication is two-way. It's not just me telling you all the time. I need to know are you receiving what I'm saying? Do you have opinions about what I'm saying? And as Mike says, oftentimes I'm shocked by people coming back and I go, okay, so maybe you should be on my side and I should be listening to you, because that was brilliant. And I think it's so important that we give young people the opportunity to be brilliant. And that's kind of something that I think fits into what you're saying. I hope I miss a lot of things, but that's what I'm hearing, is that kids are able to do more than we think, because I have a degree and I've done this for a lot of years. So you should simply sit there and soak up this knowledge. And I'm not being rude to any of my friends. Almost every friend I have is associated with music education in some way. But I think that we have overlooked some of the greatest resources we have to make great music, because they're sitting right in front of us and we just don't communicate. We don't listen. So this is exciting to me. Thank you. But I'm going back to my question, Steve, and this is just who I am. There's got to be some trust here at some point. You have to trust that your kids are going to make good choices, and they have to trust that you're not really just trying to make them do something in a fun, cutesy way, so you can say, it was your choice. So do you find there's a trust quotient? I mean, is it part of what this is?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, trust is involved in everything, right? And we often will confuse, I think, respect and trust, and I'm disrespected because we expect this innate level of trust just because of who we are. But I've met lots of people that were supposed to be like really credible people that turned out to be less than what I expected. And that's a rational response, to not immediately trust people just because they're an authority. In fact, I don't think we want a society where we automatically trust the authority without any response. But that feels different when we're the authority, right? So I definitely think you have to go into this genuinely. Like, if you don't believe the kids have anything meaningful to contribute, then you probably will not be able to do this. But if you really believe that the kids have something that they can contribute to this, that they can, be involved in decision making, that they can take some control, then you also have to do the second thing, which is be ready for it not to work sometimes. And whenever students make a decision and the decision doesn't work very good, that's actually a really powerful lesson. So if they decide to do something and it doesn't work, we might learn from that. Now, again, this is a place where certain pressures that are on people make us very risk averse. So if it's a week before contest and your first trumpet says, I think we should play 10 times louder right here, and run as fast as we can into the props, like maybe that's not a great idea, but I would say most of the time the decisions the kids want to make are short term. They come with some risk, but the risk is minimal. And what you learn from taking that risk, both as a teacher and as a student, is really great. And my on average experience has been that for anything that goes wrong with student ownership and decision making and including them in the process, there's so much stuff that goes right and so much stuff that we benefit from the students actually thinking about and practicing outside of class, or encouraging each other because they feel like it's really theirs, that it makes up for that loss on average. Also, my wife is a visual art teacher, and something that I've come to learn over my years is that visual arts teachers may actually be way ahead of band directors when it comes to all of this stuff. And there's this process that a lot of visual art teachers use called TAB. And one of the core tenets of that is that the child is the product, not their artwork, not what we show and get ribbons and put on, right? Like the child is the product. Like the point is to build the child. For band directors, the equivalency is the product is not the band, the product is the kids. And so the kids are learning and growing and improving. We're actually doing the job. And the rift is that our systems of evaluation and progression within the profession are not based on how the kids are doing. It's based on how the band performs. And we assume those are the same things. And I just don't think they are. So if a kid makes a decision, it's a bad decision, and they learn from it, that's an educational win. And even if it winds up being an ensemble setback, on average, I think the wins from letting the students have control are going to outweigh those setbacks over time. We had to learn all of this as directors by making our mistakes, by and large. The same things happen for the kids, and as that trust develops, they are likely to make probably the decision you would make more than you would think they would.
Cool.
Yeah, I love
That's
that.
cool.
I love that idea of building the students, because I'll tell you, from being someone who's 61 years old, when I talk to people who, in terms of what I do, there's two sets of people. There's the people who've been in band and the people who have not been in band. You know what I mean? It's to delineate it a little bit, but generally the response from the ones who were in band is not, I really loved playing my horn. I enjoy music to this day. It was, they were my people, they were my family, that was the community I was a part of. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's how they usually answer. If someone hasn't been in band, their answer is always, I wish I'd have learned to play a musical instrument. Think about that dichotomy, and I've kind of caught on to that as I've gotten older. It's like, that's interesting. Should we not produce students who want to play in a community band or play in their church orchestra or sit down once a week and play their clarinet, because they simply enjoy doing it? But I think it's because as we grew up, at least as I grew up, we weren't given autonomy. We were told what to do, but what we gained through the program was the sense of family, of community. So we had that relational thing. And to us, that was a fair trade. Does it make sense? To us, that was a fair trade. And I don't think that's a fair trade anymore, because they can get relational agreement and family anywhere. Now, they've got all kinds of means to do that in activities. And we really didn't have that as much. But I'll just kind of just throw that out there. What do you think about that, Stephen? What do people who wish they'd have played a musical instrument versus, oh yeah, I was in band. That was a really great family I was in.
Yeah, I think for sure that the reason that students come into a band and the reason that we're band directors and the reason we have band programs are not the same reasons. When a kid shows up in a music class, they want to play songs on an instrument. They think that's going to be cool. Or almost as common, I think, mom said I had to do this. And so, here I am. I think there's this thing that we do in Texas where everything for band directors that's not band is the enemy. Flower arranging is the enemy. If you can get a fine arts credit through flower arranging, then nobody will ever do band again, right? Like, yeah, if we have to have this PE credit, we've got to do this. And my problem with that is that I think band is worth being in, of itself. I think playing in a concert band, playing a wind instrument, being in those ensembles, that experience is worth it. But I think we're almost afraid that no one else believes that.
Yes.
You know, and so that's kind of the thing we produce. And then also, I think there's a lot of people that they come into band, and something about the environment of the band program, and this is not true of all band programs, but of many, and it's varied, doesn't fit with them for some reason. And so they might love music. They might be a very good musician, and band is not a place that actually resonates with them. And that's why we see the majority of the school population not inside of band programs. It wasn't a fit for some type of reason, right? And so I think that the only thing that's going to work out long term for band programs is for the people that are directing them and doing them to, first of all, love band so much, exude that to the children, make the band experience great. And that's what keeps bands going. And what I worry about is, again, that some of the systemic pressures actually work against this. So we talk about chair test. How many kids, when you talk to people that say these two things, they say, I wasn't good at it. I didn't like the director, right? Those are the
That's
reasons.
exactly right.
We have competence, right? We talked about these things. Competence, I wasn't good at it. If they feel like they're improving, and they don't have to be the best. Everyone knows who the best player is in the section. You don't have to parade them about. Everybody, you can hear them. Like there's no hiding in band. Even kids that think they hide, like everyone around them knows they're not playing, right? There's no hiding in band.
Yeah.
But it's competence. People who feel like and are constantly reminded that they're bad at something will stop. People that don't have a positive relationship with the other students and the director will stop playing. So you got to be developing skill. You got to have positive relationships. And then I think this third thing, which is largely missing in large ensemble programs, is this autonomy thing that we're talking about. I think the programs that meet these three psychological needs flourish and grow, and the kids love being there, and they're more fun to do. It's not that they don't have their challenges. We're still full of human beings in all these band halls, right? But, by meeting these needs, everything feels better. And it took me so long to get around to this. I think of how many students I missed the mark with. And Mike, talking about what you're saying right now about people, in communities that don't play, sometimes the very best musicians, don't do well inside a band. Yeah, even on wind instruments. They're the kids that say, I just want to be in jazz band. I want to do this marching band stuff. They're the kids that go, can I just do this part or just do this part? That something about the structure is not fitting for them, and they're pleading out for an opportunity to make music at school. And of course, our default position in Texas is no. It's all or nothing.
That's right. Yeah. If you want to play tenor in the jazz band, you better move props and do body movement and do the marching band.
And the kid says, but I work 20 hours a week after school, and I've got this other thing that's going on. And we go, well, band's not for you.
Yeah, we don't care. We don't care. Yeah. It is a cruel stance to take. And I've taken that stance before, and I got softer in my old age. I like to think I got smarter in my old age, but it's like, well, no, just play bass guitar in the jazz band. It'll be all right. It's going to be okay. We've got 160 kids in marching band. I'm pretty sure we're going to survive.
Well, and this is again where I think the systemic contest and performance pressures make us make bad decisions for kids.
Yes.
One of the things would be, what's the fastest way to fix the clarinet section kid that's out of step? Well, you kick him out.
Make him an alternate. Yeah.
That's right. You don't get to march anymore. You don't get to be a part of this. They go, oh, I'm incompetent. They drop out of band, but it doesn't matter because now there's nobody out of step. And so now we look better. So now we win. That's a very natural result. That's why large schools will have whole alternates of kids that don't get to be in the show, don't get to march at contests, that feel awful, feel like second-class citizens. We wouldn't need to do that if our goal was like entertaining the crowd and educating the children. But if we want to win, we might do those things. Same thing with the way we do these structures. We're worried that too many kids will want to just do jazz band or just do this other thing. Like too many kids will want that. Well, that should be telling us something about what we're doing if that is true. And most of the time it's not true, right? You see what I'm saying though?
Yeah.
Like, I think they're scary conversations. But I think if we don't think about these things and address them, not only do our students and our programs suffer, but the profession as a whole suffers. The other thing that I would say, the main things that I advocate for within music is student autonomy, like we're talking about. That's the main thing we've talked about. which I think includes incorporating creative music making too. It's remarkable. That's a lot of my work is centered now around, improvisation, composition, arranging, songwriting, those types of things, which are super valuable. It's kind of alarming to me that someone can go through all their schooling, elementary, middle school, high school, be in award-winning programs, major in music, become a teacher, teach for 10 years, and then I talk to them and they've never chosen what notes they played in that entire time. So that's really remarkable. That's something that's endemic to our structures that is very easy to change. It's very easy within your fundamentals to say, this scale I'm making you learn that you hate, did you know you can also mix up the notes? Now we're improvising, now we're composing, right? I advocate for us to look at embracing other forms of music education that are going to reach the other students. And I do not believe this comes at the cost to band programs. So again, I don't think that if they do a floral arranging credit, nobody will ever want to be in band again. I think the same thing is true. The program I did in San Antonio, you mentioned, was a modern band program. I hate that term. I know the guy who invented the term, and we've gone round and round about how I don't like that term.
I thought you invented that term. See, now I'm disappointed.
No. Well, you got if you spend any time outside of Texas, there's lots of stuff we haven't heard about.
Really?
And so,
I
yeah,
had no idea.
who knew? Who knew?
Blasphemy.
The approach. By the way, the term modern band, as it's used in music education lexicon now, is teaching popular music education through drums, bass, guitar, piano, those types of things, where kids can form their own bands. Think like the Beatles or Metallica. That type of format. Now, the reason the term is being used, modern band, instead of rock band, is a few reasons. Number one, the instrumentation or rock and roll, none of that's actually set. Modern band programs have all sorts of different things. So, you can imagine my students in San Antonio, sometimes someone brings in an accordion and wants to start a Tejano band, and that's totally great. That fits into the medium, right? Much like jazz band in the 70s, when we started to introduce that into schools, people said, if you do jazz band, then there will be no students in concert band anymore. They'll all want to do jazz band because it's cooler and it's hipper and people really like that, and we're worried that what we do as band directors isn't enticing enough, for some reason. I think that's basically the psychology of it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And in fact, because of that perception and probably, some systemically ingrained racism, we also couldn't use the word jazz. We didn't say jazz band in schools. We had
stage band.
Yeah, you can have a stage band, but you can't have a jazz band because that celebrates the wrong history of music, right? That's maybe not overtly what was happening, but that was definitely the subversion that was felt, is we had to call it something else. The guy who invented the term modern band, it was the same thing. Like, it's hard to convince an administration that rock band is serious, but if you say modern band, well, now it just sounds like, there's jazz band, there's concert band, there's, marching band, and there's modern band, right? My problem with the term modern is it makes it sound like a replacement when it's not. Like, what you get and the students that are attracted into a modern band setting are a completely different demographic of students. For me, it was the students that I never saw inside of a band program, that would come in, and oftentimes the students that I saw were actually some of the students that were not engaged in anything in the school. And you're around them for 10 minutes and you go, oh, these aren't band kids, right? But guess what? It doesn't matter that this kid, is decked out in nose rings and spiky hair, and we get some of those kids in band. But that they're coming in there, and you're like, looking at a kid that maybe if you were just in the neighborhood, you'd be a little bit worried. And they walk in, and they go, "Hey, can I get a practice room?" And they grab their guitar and go practice like every other kid, because most of these perceptions we have about kids and their appearance are false anyway. The advantage to that particular medium is that when you talk to students and you say, who loves music, every student raises their hand. When you go out into a seminar or something and there's hundreds of people, just general populist people, you say, who loves music? They all raise their hand. You say, who is a musician or plays an instrument at all? Almost nobody raises their hand. You ask who would like to be able to play an instrument, 70 or 80% raise their hand. The other 20% think it'd be too much work. It's not that they don't want to do it. You know what I mean? And so when we see our little slice of band There are all these other students that could be making music in some way, and a lot of things we love about band, they would be getting in these other ways. So that's part of my advocacy too. I don't think these programs are the enemy. There are actually tens of thousands of students doing modern band and popular music education in Texas right now. Dallas ISD has a huge contingent. Lots of places where a band program is also not possible. My first gig, I taught at a private school with 60 kids in the high school. And so our 20% slice was 12 kids, and that's how many we had in the band program. 12 kids does not a band make. It just doesn't. Instrumental music education, yes. Percussion ensemble, let's go. It's not a band. And in that place, we would require 100% of the students to be involved in order to have band instrumentation. Forcing a band program in those environments, I think, leaves a lot of kids out of the equation. Whereas something more like this, something where there's more opportunity, more flexible instrumentation and ensembles, can be huge. And so that's a thing that I advocate for. That scares people. Again, a lot of directors are scared that there's a robotics class, band is over. It's never going to happen again, right? People feel that way, but I think that's a straw man. It's just not true. What we do in band matters, and if we offer it in a way that students love, band can last forever. And if we lose sight of that, we're going to be the cause of our own professional demise.
And I really do feel like this whole modern band idea, it's really interesting, because we base, at least me, I'll say myself, I based my career on teaching kids how to play industrial revolution mechanical instruments. You know what I mean? That takes 7 to 8 years to become adequate on. And meanwhile, I'm completely surrounded at the end of my career by these kids who are doing modern band without me. You know what I mean? They're continuing this process because they enjoy MIDI and they enjoy computers and they enjoy synths and their guitars and they want to play the music that's on for them. I almost said radio to date myself, but you know what I mean? What the music of their culture is around them, and the music of their culture is not the whole suite.
Well,
And just like jazz in the 70s, oh my gosh, that was those directors who taught me in the 70s, that was the music that was on their radio. Think about that. So they were transferring that, and that's kind of got lost in the equation too. So I applaud you for that process. I wish more directors would jump on board, because I've had situations where a kid only played bass guitar and they end up playing synth in the marching band because they want to. And they end up playing in the jazz band. And then they have a rock band on the side that plays gigs in the community. And I don't know. I think it's a cool thing because it's where we're living right now. We have to be
yeah,
where our feet are. Our feet are
yes,
here
yeah.
in
Well,
2025. We got to live here.
it's really, really important that if someone is going to be a lifelong musician, that they connect the music and the instrument they're playing to the music they like listening to. We have a major listening crisis in band programs where they are constantly playing music that they have never listened to on instruments that they can't even name someone who plays that instrument. And within the modern band program, kids would show up. They would have already had a guitar for 3 years, but had no idea what to do with it. And they could bring in album after album of guitarists they love. And with just a little bit of direction, they would develop an enormous amount of skill. And I don't think part of it is that rhythm section instruments, because you're comping. So learning 3 chords is a lot like learning 3 notes on an instrument. But with 3 chords, you can play thousands of songs. With 3 notes,
Mhm.
you not quite as many, right? So there is a way that onboarding to these instruments is very fast. But what I've also noticed about it is just that they're listening to the music that they're trying to make. And so lots of things that we have to teach band kids, they'll actually absorb very quickly. And we can give them vocabulary for it. But like, I had way less tempo challenges with a lot of my students because they would play along to recordings all the time. Like, everything they did, they were listening to people perform this. This is the quick version. I know was probably becoming a long episode, so you can edit me out of it entirely if you'd like.
No, keep
But
going. We might divide it into 2 episodes.
well,
This is gold.
the program that I started in San Antonio was like this. It was a really weird career decision, but I think I just come to a point in my life where I really wanted to push the envelope with what I could do with student ownership, like how I could collaborate, and I didn't know what the post Grammy career would look like, right? I just didn't
Hmm.
know, and so I took a risk. and I came to this program that had hardly performed at all in the last 10 years. Basically, like lots of inner city school districts, SAISD has gone through a lot of changes, superintendent switches, changes in the structures of the school, and all those changes are devastating to fine arts programs. Like they just are. They take away the consistency that, especially in Texas, we really, really push for. And so this particular campus had been shut down. It had been reopened as 3 different schools. They're all in-district public schools, but some of them are charters, some of them are magnets, and they all share a campus. And so it's this very weird environment. And like I said, when I got there, the band program had about 30 kids, and they were split into like 7 or 8 different class periods. So it'd be like 3 trumpets over here, a tuba and a flute in this class. Just the counselors of the 3 different schools just put them in whatever period was convenient, and there wasn't a thing, right? So I can't imagine why this program wasn't successful. So I came in thinking, I'm going to take and do like a New Orleans style street band. I was thinking, well, they got the wind instruments, we'll do this, but instead of focusing on contest and stuff, we'll focus on the kids learning to improvise, create their own arrangements, and then we'll just go perform downtown because we're in downtown San Antonio. Well, I showed up there, and one of the first things I realized is that there's 1,200 students coming to this high school in 9th grade, and there's about 4 or 5 a year that have taken a music class before then. And now if you hand a 9th grader a trumpet and you say, hey, kid, you practice real hard, I mean, a few hours every single week outside of class, then in 3 years, you'll sound as good as the freshmen everywhere else. Most high school students are just not going to do that. Like it's one thing when they're in 6th grade and it's all cute and they're all doing it together. It's another thing when you feel isolated and there's other people that play better than you, and you're really aware of that in 9th grade. But if you hand a kid a bass guitar and say, you can be playing in a rock and roll band and writing your own songs by the end of the semester, easy. They'll go, I'll give you a semester. And so by just having a music education, an instrumental music education medium that was open to all students at any point in their school career, by the end of the week, we had 160 students involved instead of 37, 31, whatever it was, right? Like, boom, all of a sudden, way more kids, which was a new problem for me because I hadn't purchased any equipment yet. So,
and you were the only director.
That's right. I was doing that by myself. So I spent a whole year doing this by myself, and we'd have classes with 30 to 50 students. Now a mix of rhythm section and wind instruments, and I had to harness all of this. So what that wound up looking like was that we would have fundamental blocks together where I would teach foundational skills. We're on block scheduling, which is mostly a curse, but I guess a blessing in some ways. And so we would have time that I could do a 15, 20-minute fundamental block and teach everybody something. Then I would give them a chunk of time to practice. Most of these kids are riding buses. There's lots of public transportation. Almost none of them had their own instruments, and so their practice time was in that class. So there'd be this guided practice time where they would have a lot of flexibility, but we'd have a curriculum they were working through too. And then about halfway through class, we'd play music all together with a background track so that you really feel like you're making music, songs the kids have heard of. And then there'd be another practice session that we'd clean up, right? Then as students developed skill and interest, they could form their own bands. And so these students would form their own bands with their friends, and they got pretty good. By the end of the year, we had people that were actually starting to book their own gigs just around town, okay? The next year, we look in the enrollment, now there's 250 students. Oh no, I get a second director, we start splitting it up, we get all the wind students into the same period finally, which was really important. The number of wind students grew as the number of rhythm section students grew too. And also—
Oh, just a second. You mean with modern band, it didn't kill your concert band?
You know what? There's kids
they didn't all quit.
There's kids that really wanted to play. They wanted to play the clarinet. They didn't want to play electric guitar in a rock and roll band. That terrified them. I don't want to do that. I don't even like that music. I listen to classical music and like doing this, right? I would have been that kid. I would have been like, popular music sucks. Give me Benny Goodman, right? Like I was a weird kid.
Yeah.
I
just wanted to highlight that point that, you introduced all those other kids and your wind band actually grew in numbers because it was the cool thing to do. Let's go do music with Mr. Cox.
The campus has one of the oldest mariachi programs in the state. And there's a man there, David Zamaripa, who is an amazing mariachi teacher, right? And Miss Covarrubias. And they had consistently stayed there through all the changes. So they had this massive 250 piece, mariachi program, like
Wow.
amazing. When my program grew, their program also grew. They increased 100 students during this time. Okay. So what are we looking at? We're looking at this campus that the band program had been a mess to a campus where over 50% of the students are involved in instrumental music education of some type, right?
That is cool.
It's not the enemy. Like these
Yeah,
things
yeah.
work together. It just brings in more kids. And a certain number of those kids were really good musicians. Like they would come in, and though they hadn't been trained, they had a passion, they had an ear. And the average band student practices 0 hours a week outside of class. Statistically, the average band, we got things at the extremes, but most of them don't practice at all. I saw that, I would have these students that had never had any training but loved music, that was suddenly all they did. They would be like the all-stater kid, but within the first semester of playing an instrument.
Wow.
And so, by the end of that second year, we had over 20 independent ensembles that would perform. We would host shows that would have a huge crowd come to them that would last 4 hours and just be group after group after group performing. It was a festival type of atmosphere. The WIN program, I did a bunch of kind of unique things there. We kind of, because of the numbers of students and the way it was formatted, went with like jazz band arrangements, but kind of in the middle. It was like in the middle between jazz band and concert band.
It was
But
a true stage band.
yes, and the students were selecting the arrangements. So like
Right.
I showed, and we would have these conversations where I'm like, okay, if you guys really want to play this grade 3 you're looking at, here's all the skills we need to develop. So I'm going to order it, but 3 or 4 weeks from now, if you can't do this, you're not going to be able to play it. And they'd be like, okay, let's do that. So they would gear their practice towards the goal of playing the music that they wanted to. So this was absolutely glorious. That second year, thank God I got another director with me, because that in that class, that was getting to be a lot of students. Whenever I left and went to the Willis Wonderland Foundation, which has allowed me to do things like record a podcast with you on a school day, I the enrollment for this year was like 317 or so students for the beginning of the year in that program, in what was a completely dead program 2 years ago. And so I'm so moved by that model, and I really don't believe it's an either or. And I also believe that this type of program, there's a wave of it going across the nation. Again, we're Texas, and we kind of ignore everywhere else. Okay.
Hey, but Stephen, you have an organization going. Can you throw out the contact
Yeah.
info for that? I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're exactly right. You're
But there
exactly
might be
right.
people going, I want to connect with some people. Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple different things. So if in particular, since we were just talking about modern band, the modern band movement really started with my friend David Wish. He's the guy that came up with the term modern band. He started an organization called Little Kids Rock. He's not a trained musician, but he was an elementary teacher in a New York City school that had no music at the school. And again, we're a little privileged because we do have music at almost all of our schools to some extent in Texas, but it's not uncommon in places to not have music. Well, he took and started teaching guitar after school to the students because there were kids interested in music, and he was a softie, and he had his guitar there. So that quickly grew into a whole guitar program that he was running out of a janitor closet. Then it grew into teaching all the other teachers at the school how to play guitar so that they could all teach the students. And then it grew into the largest music education nonprofit, probably, period, that operates in this way. And that was Little Kids Rock, and now Music Will. So if you're interested in modern band pedagogy, they have so many resources. And I think it's just musicwill.org. I'm almost certain that's it, but just Google Music Will.
That is correct. It's
It's a
musicwill.org.
it's a question and an answer. What builds up kids? Music will. Music will build up kids. It's catchy. They did good.
Yeah.
And so I highly recommend, if you're interested in it, to look into that. They will have a booth next to the organization I work for and next to the Association for Popular Music Education at TMEA this year. And so if you are, popular music curious, you want to think about how this could affect the music programs at your school, then come and see us, and everyone who does this is really excited about it. Like, we've seen the benefits and we want to make sure that people know that this is a thing that can happen that is really beneficial to kids. The organization that I work for now is called the Willis Wonderland Foundation. And it's this wonderful opportunity of this legendary creative musician, Allie Willis, who wrote Boogie Wonderland at September, the Earth, Wind, and Fire songs. She wrote the theme song to Friends. She wrote co-wrote all the music to the Color Purple, the musical. Like, she had this amazing career. She passed away suddenly on Christmas Eve in 2019, and it was devastating to this huge number of people that loved her. And out of that tragedy grew from her wishes this foundation that seeks to empower the next generation of artists and musicians. And I fortunately got connected to them early this year and have worked with them to build music education programming. So now I get to go and lead workshops in creative music making all across the United States. As we've done LA, we've done New York City. It was my first time in New York City. Oh my gosh, for a kid from early Texas, I'm lucky I didn't get hit by a car. But like, wait, there's traffic here. Look at this. Do these traffic lights mean anything? No. What's the subway? It was an amazing experience for me. And what I've learned, we just did Joplin, Missouri. I had an amazing experience at Missouri Southern State University, right?
Is that where you did the jazz band and they wrote their tune?
No, that was actually in Crum, Texas. Yeah,
I want you to go to that somewhere in this discussion, because that was absolutely amazing. And I saw the recording, the YouTube. It was really cool.
If you've got region bands and clinics, as much as I struggle with the whole concept of how competition works, I really love doing all region clinics, and I'm fairly good at it. The kids have a nice time. The music sounds good. The parents are happy, but that. Yes. So let me come back to that.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah. You do your thing.
The Willis Wonderland Foundation, again, they've given me the opportunity for me as a career was to see music education at a larger scale, to step back and at least see the national scope of what's happening, to build a community with more music educators, and to really help create resources for the things that I believe in. And so we have a songwriting curriculum that it's very usable for integrating. I don't know if I'd build an entire class around it yet, but it can be integrated in almost any class to make songwriting very approachable. It's actually very easy. What you do is you write some words and you sing them and you've written a song. But yet most people who've studied music for 30 years, haven't ever written a song. Same thing with improvisation. I'm working on resources for that now, and the workshops have been a privilege. We sit down with a group of teachers and we do songwriting, we do improvisation, we do arranging of songs, talk about chord symbols, talk about how to do that, how to basically operate like a gigging musician, and how to integrate those things. Like, I think the best thing is from the moment you meet the students to be integrating those things. Hey, you've learned a note on trumpet, let's improvise some rhythms on that note. Oh, 2 notes? What happens if we play this note first and then this one? Oh, what if we do it the other way around? Oh, we have a scale. Let's improvise on a background track with this cool scale you learned. Oh, isn't that neat? Here's how you can use it. Those types of things. Like learning to compose is you've learned a few notes on an instrument and then I hand you staff paper. Like, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. So anyway, we're working on these techniques, working on building a community around it. Because as many ideas as I have, there's way more people with way better ideas that we're trying to cultivate or steal, but mostly cultivate, right? Yeah. So we're really working on trying to develop resources around creative music making, and those other projects. I really enjoy doing all region events. Like, it is, you get to go in, you get to be grandpa, you get to not have to live with the long-term consequences of your actions, which is, I think, a pretty good deal. And so this was a great opportunity to experiment at this particular clinic, and it was an ATSSB second band. And so I know you guys are probably aware of second band syndrome, where nothing you do matters in your mind because you didn't make the top band. It's an epidemic among all region kids. And that's one of the reasons I particularly like the second band. And my secret goal, even though I abhor competition, is to try to make the second band experience feel escalated in such a way that it's the same or better than the top band experience, right? Mm-hmm. I would never say that out loud, except for on this podcast, apparently, but I feel like I want to counteract that syndrome, especially. So I got the idea that maybe we should do some of the songwriting I've been working on as a part of that all region experience. And so we wrote 12 bar blues together. And I'm working on publishing some resources about this because what we basically did was we talked about blues form. We did a simple, 3 chord blues, right? So 12 bars, in the key of F. And I wrote up the chord progression and we played the chord progression. So I had a sheet that basically had all the chord spellings from them, and it's pick a note in that chord. We played the chord progression together. Okay. Then we talked about comping. The rhythm section came with some skills, so they were comping that blues pretty quick. And we took and we wrote backgrounds. So we came up with some background rhythms for the winds. And so they would just pick a note in the chord. I didn't care what note, this is and they'd play the backgrounds. Okay. So just vanilla voicings, 1, 3, 5, 7, and that was really cool. And then we go, well, now we got to write lyrics. So lyric form for a blues is AAB. So if you think about, for example, the St. Louis Blues, they go, I hate to see the evening sun go down. I hate to see the evening sun go down because my baby done gone left town. Same thing twice, and then a rhyme. So we did the same thing. Now we needed a sad experience, and the whole time we're doing this, I'm, I'm asking the kids, what do you want to do on this? Throughout the whole process, I was visiting with the students, and they're making some choices. So, well, what's another rhythm we could use? Oh, let's try this. What rhythm we use for backgrounds doesn't matter. We'll come up with something creative. A lot of times, when you have a brain trust of, in that case, 18 kids, they're going to come up with better ideas than any one person would anyway. So we're brainstorming ideas. And what had happened is the 2 tenor sax players in the band, they went home after the Friday rehearsal, got sick, and we had to call in alternates in the morning. And so the kids decided to write the 6 saxophone blues. And so we wrote lyrics.
Awesome.
One of the things that's a lot of fun, if you ever have an opportunity to ask the band kids if someone wants to sing something, you can get some really neat stuff. Like one of my favorite experiences at Eastland was we did I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas one year, like this nice little arrangement. And we had one of our kids sing it. And that kid's now a vocal major at Baylor or just graduated, even though we didn't have a choral program in Eastland. But he came up and sang as this big thing, right? It adds this liveliness to add those lyrics. So I said, who wants to try to sing the lyrics? I had 4 kids come up. All 4 of them did a very nice job. One did a particularly good job. So she got the chorus, and we put this whole thing together. So then it becomes, how do we craft an arrangement together? And so if you do jazz band, you do combo playing, crafting arrangement is what you do, like we've got the head of the tune. How are we going to make this into something, that's going to last 3 or 4 minutes? So we had the piano player improvise an intro. And then we had the guitar player play a 12-bar solo, and then we had the lyrics, and when are we going to do the chorus? When are we going to do this? Of course, they all agreed we have to start with one of the tenor saxophone players for a solo, So then we put together this arrangement, you get to the concert and you go, hey, your kids not only worked hard to prepare this concert and to do this, but they also are going to do the world premiere of a song that they wrote this morning, and so the parents are checked in and applauding before you play the first note. And it really is an environment of the students are doing all of those things. They did improvise it. They did write the lyrics. This song is theirs. And so I think that was a really unique experience, but it doesn't have to be. I'm not Irving Berlin or anything. I'm not Allie Willis. I am just a teacher who was open to playing with this. Is it the greatest song ever written? No. Is it good? Yeah, it is. It's good.
But also it will live in their memory for their entire lifetime. Those kids are going to talk about that when they're 70 years old.
Well,
when they went to region band and they wrote a song.
kids are really sweet, but some of those kids came up afterwards and were like, this is the best all region experience that I've had. And it wasn't because we played the hardest music they'd ever played, which I think a lot of people think the purpose of All Region Band is to allow these kids to play hard music they've never gotten to play before. Well, that's a trap to lead to a really terrible, stressful experience that ends in a bad concert, if you ask me.
I've lived that. I've lived that before, Stephen.
That's how you get the second band to sound better than the first band, is whoever does the first band over programs.
I've gone that route. I usually do the second or third bands. Doing a third band next weekend, and you're right. Hopefully the lead clinician will over program, and my kids will sound really good.
But how personal was that experience? That was such a personal thing.
Beyond
just music.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, and they all got to contribute. They got to create, they got to have a good time. It broke up the experience, because I really do think we have to be smart about how we have all region experiences, because this is, if we're expecting it to be this extrinsic reward of I earned this experience, well, then we need that experience to be really good and not just stressful and authoritarian, but actually, can we make this experience something that leaves them going back home super inspired and excited, and everyone feels like they contributed? That's not easy to do, but I do think it should be our goal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, well, Derek,
yes,
it's about that time.
It's if you're all ready for it to be that time. I'm enjoying this. I actually have no idea how long we've done this. So
I tell you what, anytime I get to talk to Stephen, it always brightens my day. And so I always, when that phone lights up, unless it's an emergency, I always answer, don't I, Stephen?
You do. Well, and listen, the same thing. Like it's been a joy to have you as someone that I always knew I could call, that whether or not I agreed with your opinion, I knew that it would be a good opinion, right? And so that's been a really powerful thing for me. And I so love that now all these people, on the interwebs are getting to have that same experience. So I'm so happy you guys are doing this.
Well, thank you. Hey, man, I appreciate you being here. You're a good friend and have blessed my life. And so hope you have a really great year. And I love the stuff you're doing with the foundation. Just keep doing your thing. You're doing wonderful work.
Can I ask you something, Steve? If somebody wants to talk more about this, I know you're a busy person. Do you mind sharing, or if we share contact, they might set something up, they could sit down and talk to you more in depth?
Yep, please. My job right now, really over this semester, is community building. And so there's a couple ways I'm doing that are really important. One, I do have a website. It's stephentcox.com. It's spelled STEPHEN, but I think I might have registered both domain names. I don't remember. But STEPHENTCOX. And usually I link to my other stuff there. There is a Facebook group called Texas Popular Music Educators that if you are doing any type of pop music stuff, we're trying to create community in Texas around that, because there's a lot of people doing it, but not really any structures around that. There's actually now a TexAPME, which is a Texas Association of Popular Music Educators. And so this needs to be a conversation with lots of people. And I'm on Facebook. I'm real easy to find. And I usually will read a message and even respond to them. And so lots of ways to get a hold of me. And you can't stop me from talking about it. So let's go.
That sounds like a threat.
All right, man. Well, Mike, any other questions from you?
No. I mean, we could go in a lot of different things. Maybe have Stephen back for another round on
no doubt
either competition or just there's so many ways to go in this. Every one of those points that Stephen brought out could be in its own entire podcast and be beneficial to people out there. So,
I think we could do an entire one about self-determination theory if you're up for it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, my wife says that those are dirty words in our house. Self-determined, because I have talked her ear off about
it. We'll give you an outlet.
We'll give you an outlet. Save your marriage that way.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you both. I know you're both busy guys, and I got to tell you, I just appreciate what you do for young people and for music in general. Again, we had this conversation in the podcast, but I'm one of those kids. I found family, and 50 years later, still talk about it. So it's that formative and that important to me. So appreciate you both. Y'all have a blessed week, and I promise we'll talk again soon.
All right. Good
Thank
deal.
you, guys.
Thank you.